Hi everyone, this is Paul Allen Clifford from Church Tech Today. I just wanted to show you something really exciting. This is ProPresenter 7. Yep, we've had ProPresenter 6 for years and years, and now we've got ProPresenter 7, and I just wanted to go through 7 of my favorite features. I've had this since October, and it's been killing me not to share this with all of you, and so I'm just really excited to dive into this. So the first one is pretty obvious, dark mode. As it turns out, when you're a church techie, there are times where you're in the back of the room, and if you have a bright display just lighting up your face, it just draws a lot more attention to you than you want to be drawn to you. And maybe you're even in a situation where it distracts from what's going on in church. Maybe it's during an Easter presentation and they're they've got a dark mood set, but if your monitor is bright and lighting up the room, it can be really distracting. So now we have dark mode so that it's less so. The second thing I want you to look at is a new organizational scheme. Now, you probably already noticed that in ProPresenter 6, this was over here, and this was generally hidden. So what's going on here? Well, I think the people over at Renewed Vision took a long look at the organization of ProPresenter and they said, it really doesn't make that much sense. When you think about it, why do you put stuff in over here and then you see it over here, and then to change it you go over here? Instead, basically this is a 3-column layout. So we have our libraries. That's something I'm not going to mention in too much detail, but you do have access to multiple libraries. You've got your playlists. You've got the items in your playlist, and you have your different options for organizing media down here. Now, you spend most of your time in here changing between slides. This are slides from a recent webinar that I did where I wasn't allowed to show people how I was doing it, but I was doing it in ProPresenter 7. So that's where you spend most of your time switching between slides and such. And then you have your background. Now, to see what it actually looks like, it's over here. So if I were to click on this one, for example, we see the preview over here. Now, what you might notice is the clear buttons that used to be way over here are now right here, and they're more intuitive because it shows what layer is being used right now, and so you know which to clear. This, of course, is the slides layer, but I've got other layers that I can clear, or I can just click clear all. So I have a lot of power here. And before, if you wanted to go in between different screens, you kind of had to know the keyboard shortcut or go up into the menu. No longer. Now we have the ability to select the audience screen or the stage display, or stage displays, or audience screens. More about that in a minute. So this is just a much better layout, in my opinion. I kind of wish they'd always started with this, because it does take a little getting used to if you're used to the way ProPresenter used to look. But once you get used to it, it makes so much more sense that you start with creating your content over here, you actually display it from here, and you preview it over here. Next, this is something that is so obvious, but it's such a little trick. Just a little addition to ProPresenter, and that is this background. Now, you'll notice that I'm using this background on this slide, but what you might not notice is that this is a checkerboard pattern, but this is a black background. What's going on here? Well, the checkerboard indicates that this is a transparent slide. So, who am I is over a transparent background, and this picture of me is also over this transparent background. So, that's really good to know. It's not that if you saw it in ProPresenter 6, oh, and by the way, you can turn that off if you don't like it. I don't know why you would, but you could if you wanted to. In ProPresenter 6, it would have looked like this, and you wouldn't have known that this is a separate element from this. This might have been a Photoshop file that I created to look just like that instead of 3 different elements. But in ProPresenter 6, it's very obvious. This text that I have down here, exponential little bits, sorry if you missed the webinar, it's obvious that these are individual text elements over a transparent background. So, in either of these cases, if I choose a background, it goes underneath what I have. If I clear a background, it goes away, and it just reveals whatever's underneath, in this case, nothing, so it's black. So those are the first 3 things that I wanted to tell you. This next one is kind of hidden in plain sight, and you might not have noticed it. Right up here. What's that? Well, it's not actually that one, it's this one. Sorry, not used to that. Clear announcements. What is announcements? Well, to make it clear, you've also got to know something else. That ProPresenter can have multiple outputs, and you can set a slide loop to continually play on the announcement layer, which can go to your lobby TVs. So that gives you an added piece of power and control that you can have the announcement loop on your lobby TVs looping constantly, let's say, while you're setting up for church. And what you do in your setup doesn't affect the announcement loop. It just continues to play. And then if you want to keep that looping during your entire church service, perfectly fine. You can do that. Or when the time comes, let's say you want what's coming out of ProPresenter to show up on the lobby TVs, then you can clear that. And as I say, since you can switch between them, I could have multiple outputs right here. I don't have multiple ones right now, but I could, and I can preview what's going to the lobby TVs, for example, and I can then switch back and preview what's going to the main screen or the stage display or the other stage display, or you get it. Another piece of that puzzle, so I was talking about multiple displays. If we go into this new screens option up here and click configure screens, you'll notice that I've already got a screen up here that's 1920 by 1080. I'm going to add another screen. I'm going to do a placeholder screen just because I only have 2 additional screens in addition to the control screen, and I'm going to make that a custom size. So let's call this preaching TV. And let's say that that one, we had an older TV and it's a 720p TV, so it's 1280 by 720. So I have screen 2 which is 1080p, and screen 3, which is 720p. I can have multiple resolutions of outputs with ProPresenter 7. That's something the multi-screen module could not do before. So that's really exciting. I told you about stage display. Let's add let's send it via siphon. Let's say that we want a 1080p stage display via siphon. We can do that in ProPresenter 7. And you'll notice that I have two. So I can have multiple stage displays with multiple layouts built into ProPresenter. I chose siphon, but it could have been an SDI output. It could have been an attached wired output. It could have even been one of the outputs of a Matrox triple head to go or a DataPath X4, any of those things. So that's really exciting as well, that now I have that flexibility. So I told you I was going to tell you about multiple stage displays and multiple screens. And you might be thinking, wait, if I can do multiple screens, why would I buy the multi-screen module? And the answer is, you wouldn't. You also wouldn't buy the Alpha Keyer module or the SDI module. I mentioned SDI. Or, well, let me just give it away. There are no modules because it's all baked into ProPresenter 7 now. All the modules that were an extra cost are built in. So, let's say your church once or twice a year wants to do Alpha Key. For Christmas and Easter, you just want the best keying ability. You're not buying the $1,000 Alpha Keyer module for just a couple of services a year. You can use it and then not use it whenever you want. The only thing you need is the hardware, and maybe you rent that somewhere, or you buy it and then sell it on eBay, or you buy it used, try it out, decide it's not for you, sell it again. Whatever you do, that is just something really amazing that they've cut down their profit center to give us in the church much more power. Now, the next thing I've got to talk about is Bibles, because this is something that we're seeing much more in the American church, definitely. And whether it's the case that the reason I was thinking of this is you're a multilingual congregation, or maybe your pastor just wants to add multiple versions of the Bible at the same time on a single screen, ProPresenter 7 makes that a lot easier. So let me call this verse, call this reference, and go into John 3:16. So that's one, but we have some other options. Now, you will need to choose break on verse for this to work, but once you do that, you can add a second translation. So what you're doing here is you're telling it which text box has which, and I haven't chosen a template that has all the text boxes I need, but I could easily, when I have the appropriate template, selected, I could have the basic Bible in Basic English, the King James Version, the Spanish version. I can just keep adding as many as I want. I only have 4 Bibles installed right now, but if I had 6 Bibles, I could have 6 different verses. Now that might get really crowded, especially if you're using that one verse in Esther that's like way, way, way long. But you can see the power that you have in ProPresenter 7. Finally, let's go back to show here. I wanted to show you the new editing updates. I already showed you what the Bible was like. What if we go into editor? Now, first off, if you're familiar with Pro 6, you remember that the editor in Pro 6 was like an overlay, and when you got done with the editor, you clicked an X to close it out. Now it's more modal. So these are the different modes of ProPresenter. Your regular show mode, which you'll be in most of the time except when you're creating. Edit is the editor. Reflow is the reflow editor. The Bible we already touched on, etc. So let me go back to editor. And now we're in editor. This used to be an X because that's how you would get out of it. Now you just click back on show. But when we're here, it's got some improvements over what used to be the case. So first off, if I want to add something new to this slide, I click the plus, and that adds whichever of these things that I have, and their new shapes. So that's cool. I can add media, whether it's stills like this picture of me, or a video input, or a web page, or text, whatever I want to add, this is where I would add it. Another cool little feature is it used to be that slide notes were kind of an afterthought over in this area. Not anymore. Now they're down here. So you'll notice that in my webinar that I did earlier, I have all kinds of notes here. That's because they're easy to put in, they're easy to show with the new multiple stage display layouts. You can have a field for notes just as easily, and it's just a great improvement. The objects here, if I want to select this, I can lock them over here, which you could do locking before. It just strikes me as much more intuitive now. Or I can reorder things here, or right click and bring to front, or send to back, and so on. And before these tabs, there were, I believe, 5 of them in ProPresenter 6, and now there are just 3, which make it so much easier because okay, this is the presentation settings, where I put in the copyright information, the transition. This is stuff for the slides, what the hotkey is, the label of this particular slide, whether I want the background to show or not, adding in a chord chart, and the build. This would be build order if I wanted this to show up, and then this in different orders. I could do that just by choosing a transition here, and notice there are some new transitions, although artistically speaking, I'm much more of a minimalist with the cut and the cross dissolve as my transitions of choice, but you do have other options here. So this is just some of the great new stuff that is available in ProPresenter 7. And that's 7 things. Dark mode, the left to right layout reorganization, the option for the checkerboard for media with transparency, slide loops on the announcement layer that's totally separate, different resolutions, those two I've combined into one. The fact that modules are a thing of the past because it's all baked in right now for no additional money. Multiple versions of the Bible on a single slide. You saw me prepping to add 4, and you could add more, although at a certain point it just won't fit that many. The toolbar and editing updates I told you about, and there's one more thing. And for a lot of you, I've saved the best for last when I tell you this. And I'd love to show it to you, but I actually can't because this is a Mac. And now ProPresenter 7 has been completely rewritten to be the same on the PC as on the Mac. They're both identical versions. And the PC version, like the Mac version, is 64-bit. So it's not going to be suffering from some of the limitations that the Windows version had before. So now they're equal. Now you can choose what computer you run ProPresenter on based on the reasons you choose, not based on whether you want ProPresenter to run okay or really well. So I think I saved the best for last. I think I buried the lead. A lot of you are probably in disbelief that this is going to be true, but I've seen it run. I've been talking to people at Renewed Vision for months about this, and they've just done a bang-up job. And that's why I'm so excited to tell you all about these great new 7, actually 8 features in ProPresenter 7.